What's up, everybody? I am currently talking to Dan via Skype. He will join us shortly. Um, the reason you see me holding another microphone isn't because I'm a dickhead who needs to have two microphones like someone from Nickelback, but basically, I have two microphones set up so we can record the local audio for the actual podcast episode, going through a different set of computers and all that stuff, which is this one. And then basically the one I'm holding is so I sound halfway decent to you, and it's not the shitty like laptop recording that you will sometimes hear. So Dan will be joining us shortly once he figures out some of his technical problems. He ended up having some internet issues earlier today, which kind of made me wonder if we were actually going to get to do this. So, all of that aside, we are also going to have James Shotwell end up joining us in a little while to talk about the High Notes podcast that he dropped the first season yesterday. And I binge listened to most of it, and I really enjoyed it. I know there's probably a little sense of irony that show called, brutally speaking, where the crux of it is, sort of that we're drinking and so forth, and listening to a sober recovery podcast. But as someone who has kind of, I don't want to say struggled with my own bouts of sobriety or anything like that, but just there have been times I decided to quit drinking entirely. Um, and just kind of to get a handle on that kind of stuff and kind of see if I can. And I think I went about 11 months. So kind of an interesting time. It's definitely interesting to go to a bar and hang out with your friends when they're getting shitty wasted, as you are not. You get to hear the same thing over and over and over again. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, the podcast is really good, and I've actually really enjoyed it. And like I said, we're going to talk to James in a little while, more about the show, kind of a little bit of his own going ons with all of that, and basically just kind of talk to him for a little bit, and support a podcast that I think is good and should be listened to, especially if you haven't seen the news in the last day from it for Tommy Vext of Bad Wolves. And all of that said, still waiting on Dan to join. I actually should, if I'm thinking about it, should send the link over to James, so then that way he can actually join us when we're ready. I guess I should have done that preemptively, but I'm not always the smartest when it comes to these things. I have been working on getting our winners for the 7-inch figured out. We are giving away later. We are giving away my D acacia strain. Oh, there's Dan calling on the other line. All right. Blue da da dee da doo da. So sending James over the thing. I'll text him when he's ready. Yeah, yeah, sound better. All right, so back to the StreamYard, back to doing all this shit. No one's, yeah, no one's watching right now, but yeah, basically, we are recording for the Stabbing Westward episode that I did probably about a month ago at this point. That's got to get turned off wherever that came from. Oh, yeah. It's one of my biggest gripes is when you can hear, like, especially if someone has a Apple, computer or MacBook or whatever, you can just hear like all the notifications dinging off in the background because it's being recorded from their thing. I fucking hate when you can hear that. No, that was me. I got an email. Basically, yeah, I got an email basically saying that we're live over on the Facebook thing, so or on YouTube. So that's yeah. So it is that, and I will. Oh, okay, I was like, I sent it to you. Yeah, about that. Illegal leopard.
Hey, I exist.
Yes, you do.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
There you go. That looks nice.
Yeah. And it also kind of fits the background you have going on.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, a little bit.
Or the background on the stream, that is.
Yeah.
Playing
Yeah,
around
that's cool.
didn't see the one we did last week with Tom from the Acacia Strain. The background was the Slow Decay album cover.
Nice.
So
I'm looking pretty crystal clear on this thing.
yeah, you are actually on the stream.
Cool. Yeah.
Whatever. Skype's not always the best, so it is what it is.
It's a different webcam.
Right.
Because I'm on my laptop now, so.
Fair enough. Same. But I guess I can roll right into the podcast thing, so that way I can put this microphone down and focus more on the live stream.
There you go.
All right, here we go. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Brutally Speaking podcast. I am one of your hosts, John, and with me, as always, is Daniel Terry. How are you doing this evening?
Dude, I am, barely alive, but I'm doing all right.
Yeah, you had a rough day.
Yeah, it wasn't the best. I ended up getting, I ended up getting sent home from work for having a fever. And I've had a really nasty sinus infection for the past couple of days. And, in this current day and age, this environment, coming to work with a fever is not the best course of action. So they're like, yeah, get out of here.
Yeah, absolutely. This episode's guest is Christopher Hall, the vocalist of Stabbing Westward, also a guitar player and partial programmer and producer and jack of all trades, I guess.
I think the word you're looking for is extraordinaire.
Yes, that is a word I could use. This was actually kind of fun. The band had put out a new single as of when we did this interview, but then basically COVID happened and seemingly all the plans the band had, just like everybody, went to shit. So now I don't know when the record that they were supposed to be working on or putting out, I don't know when that is going to be coming out. But this was a fun interview. I probably we will be known as huge Stabbing Westward fans, and I know maybe with this podcast you wouldn't assume like, oh, of course you guys are going to have Stabbing Westward on, but I think especially when Dan does like New Metal May, is it New Metal May?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. For some reason, it didn't sound right. As I was saying, I was like, it's not New Metal May. What do you guys call it? You have too many theme months, so it's a little bit hard to keep them all in track and not get them.
Hey, we only have two. We have New Metal May and Industrial December.
Yeah. That one doesn't roll off the tongue as well.
Yeah, look out for KMFDM. That's going to be rough.
Did you already start listening to all their records?
I mean, I kind of have no choice. Yeah.
And are you guys actually going to do the MFKD, whatever the reverse of that is? Are you counting that?
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
It's kind of hard not to talk about it.
Right. But yeah, no, Stabbing Westward. This was this was one of those that I had the opportunity to do thanks to being furloughed. Like a lot of the interviews actually we've done pretty recently, and it just started off so easy. I typically don't, we don't just typically bullshit with someone for a solid 20, 30 minutes first. Like, and it got to the point where as you I don't remember if I kept it in or not, but his kid came in. He was like, oh, I'll be off the phone in like 5 minutes. I was like, oh shit, I haven't asked you anything.
Hey man, it happens. I mean, sometimes you just get into that flow of conversation and there's not really any way out of it, and I like those chats. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Like, I know, like, objectively speaking, it's not like considered professional or whatever, but like, I don't know, man. As time goes on, I care less and less about that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I'm just like, I love the idea that it could be a rather, conversation, like, listening to the ID10T podcast today with Ted Danson and his wife, Mary, I can't pronounce her last name, like Streamberger or whatever. I think it's the mom from Step Brothers. And it was just like so great to hear them all like kind of bullshitting and talking and intermittently, they would kind of ask each other questions and so forth. But just as a whole, it was like, it just felt like, the whole thing that, I think everyone who listens to podcasts and enjoys them will always say is the reason they like them is because it makes it feel like you're a fly on the wall in like in an environment where you get to listen in on a conversation that between two people. And I think in that regard, I think this episode with Chris, I think is really fun. I mean, even after sending it over to the publicist after the fact, it was like, oh, it's so crazy how like you're able to just kind of put people into an ease, like like they're able to just kind of talk to you, and it's like, well, that's sort of the whole point of these things, isn't it? Is just to have a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, conversationalists. I think the appeal of podcasts isn't just like landing a great interview. I mean, I know we enjoy that on our end, but like, it's really just having those conversations. You get to be like, yeah, I chatted with somebody from Stabbing Westward, and yeah, maybe it didn't like have a lot of direction, but I really enjoyed that I got to have that chat, and I don't know, it makes people seem very real.
Yeah, most definitely. And especially with a band, like something we like to kind of focus on a little bit is the fact that, getting a band and getting someone like Chris from Stabbing Westward was one of those bands that, kind of broke up and went away before the internet really became what it is, and long form interviews kind of became a thing. So it's really cool to kind of get to chat with someone. It almost kind of reminded me of the John Clayton Pitch Shifter episode, where it's like you're just kind of talking about an era of music making that's so prolific to us as like, mid 30s, because it's like, everyone knew Stabbing Westward growing up, like especially if you were into the kind of music that we all were. So the fact that it's like, oh, I'm getting to talk to the dude that I used to watch on MTV like almost every day, and I'd hear that song on my local radio station like every day. It's kind of surreal. It's just, I don't know. It's so weird. But it's really cool at the same time, because I hope that basically I will be able to, or that we will be able to find fans that kind of maybe forgot about the band.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, I was actually kind of surprised whenever this kind of came across the desk, because I was like, man, to be honest, I haven't really kept track of that band.
Well, they just got back together probably 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's not really been that long, and they haven't done a whole lot since. But I think the thing that it will be interesting to me is just to kind of see what comes of the quote unquote reunion, and just the new inspiration to create music under the Stafford banner again.
Yeah, totally. And I think this is pretty exciting. I would say that I was a fairly big fan back in the day. Me and my friends used to be a big fan of how just dark their records were.
Absolutely. Well, I think this is as good a chance as any to get into the conversation with Chris of Stabbing Westward, and we will talk to you guys on the other side of it.
Yeah, hopefully I don't look like total death on screen right now.
It's whatever. I have a John Wick background, so total death would actually fit that.
Oh, there you go. That's perfect. Oh my goodness. Let's see here. I'm going to share this on my page real quick that we're doing this.
Okie
dokie. What have you been drinking, John? I've just been drinking plenty of liquids.
So funny you say that. So like right now, I just actually got done drinking the last of the sweet tea that I made, and then mixed with some lemonade. So I made like my own like Arnold Palmer that's been sitting in a giant tea container. So I've been drinking that all week, and I just finished that. I have a PBR currently, which you can see. I probably will get into this Grand Armory. Oh, I just moved my microphone. Probably get into this Grand Armory Nuttier Business straight from Grand Armory. We went up there this past weekend to go swimming in the lake and all that. And I got some, and they're like, well, you can buy like it in cans for like, you can get a 6-pack for like $12. And I was like, yeah, I just want the one though. And because it's on tap. It's not like, I mean, I know it's basically the same thing, but it's not.
Right.
And then I've been loving these as of late, these sparkling ice with caffeine.
Nice.
The blue raspberry one's so good. So I found that Gordon Food Service apparently sells them in like 12-pack cases. So it's the same price as it is on Amazon. So I was like, fuck it. Now I don't have to like pay for shipping and wait. I can just get it.
There you go.
And then I have a Brewdog Clockwork Tangerine hazy IPA, or just an IPA. It's okay. But I got to drink them because I bought them. So, and then because I love beverages of all kinds, I also have my Gatorade.
Yeah, I wish I had Gatorade at home right now. It's just been basically just cold water for me, and then like warm water, because like when you've got so much sinus pressure, like warmth is like I'll get a warm glass of water and just hold it against my face.
The other, like, usually I might have one actual cold beverage at work, but more times than not, I almost kind of prefer my drinks when it's hot outside just to be kind of like room temperature, because then it's not like such a shock to you when you're drinking it.
Right.
It's kind of easier to drink.
That's fair.
So that was my conversation with Christopher Hall of Stabbing Westward. Again, like, you know, we kind of kept echoing in the intro there. It was a lot of fun. You know, I kind of enjoyed shooting the shit about, you know, the old Grand Rapids scene, and especially him being like, oh, I got a tattoo one of the last times I was there before we performed. I completely forgot there's a tattoo studio underneath the Reptile House. So it's kind of funny that I guess forever he has a keepsake of literally being here in town and playing while on tour.
Yeah, that is really cool.
I don't know what the tattoo is. I should have asked him what it was.
Should have had him show it to you. I think you guys were on the phone, but you know.
Yeah, we were on the phone.
It happens.
Yeah. I also liked right at the end there when I was like, yeah, I'm kind of surprised that you were able to get like clearance on those samples. And he was like, yeah, you know, we didn't, you know, but we only pressed it on vinyl a limited amount. And I go, well, I mean, it's on like Spotify and shit. He goes, oh, what? So it's like, yeah, you might need to check into that, dude.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah. What, you know, this is kind of funny because like going back, like I went through and was listening to a ton of Stabbing Westward leading up to this. Were you someone that only kind of really liked that first record? Because it almost reminds me of the Finch Say Hello to Sunshine story, where it's like, you know, the band basically was following in what they wanted to do, and then, you know, they put out this other record, and then everyone was like, you know, this sucks, this isn't what we wanted. And sort of the same kind of thing applied where, you know, as Krista was saying, that like they fired some people that maybe they shouldn't have, that, you know, everyone was like, well, I mean, you sold like 500,000 copies of this record, but you should have been selling like 1 million or 2 million. Like, here's what you need to do. And it's like, it's weird to hear someone go, well, I'm happy with where I'm at. I don't need that extra level of success. Like I'm totally fine with being where we're at. Like, that's a good career. And you just don't hear shit like that. Like, you don't hear people make that comment, like where they're like, yeah, you know, like the success we had on this record is just fine.
Yeah. I think the last time I heard anything like that was I think it was when Toomey interviewed Jeff Walker of Carcass. I think that's the last time I've heard anything like that, where he asked, because they had just put out their Surgical Steel record. Actually, they'd been touring on it for like 2 years. And Toomey was like, yeah, so I mean, what else do we have? You know, what else do you guys got, you know, in the tank or whatever? He's like, I don't know, man, this record's going pretty well. I think we're just going to kind of keep doing that. And not exactly the same situation, but like I can totally understand the sentiment too, because like, you know, we get messages all the time from people that are like, oh, you guys are only reaching, you know, however many people with your podcast. And we could promote it more for you. And, you know, and half the time you go to their page and they have like a Facebook account and 2 followers, and you're like, yeah, sure. But I mean, it is one of those, like, being content with where you're at just shows kind of a level of devotion to your craft. And you being fine with, like, dude, I put this record out and that's all I really wanted to do. I don't care if people like it or hate it. You know, they could take it or leave it. I don't have to sell 1 million records to feel good about myself.
Yeah, it was just really, I don't know, a lot of this was just really refreshing, but I think a lot of it is also the fact that, you know, as we sort of joked when I was like, yeah, I don't really know how much older you are than me. And then he's like, oh, I've got you by almost 20 years. But it's like,
right.
You kind of forget that sometimes, like, we're so used to seeing the inverse, where it's like everyone's like, more, give me all the fame, give me all the money, give me all this attention. And to see someone that's just like, well, I wasn't expecting it. Everything that I kind of achieve is pretty cool, and I'm pretty satisfied with it. But like, after a certain level, it's just like, well, I mean, how much more do I need?
Yeah, I mean, you really, I guess this depends on the person, but like, it just seems to me like you don't need much.
No. I think that's something maybe a lot of people could apply to their lives too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I can relate to that in kind of a way because so my job is I literally go to work in the morning and I fix machines and then I go home. And like I'm kind of cool with that. Like I don't make all the money,
Right.
but I'm also not like vying for advancement opportunities or trying to like outdo people because there's like a lot of weird backstabbing and like bad human behavior that comes with that a lot of the time.
Absolutely.
And I am ambitious in my creative projects, but like as far as work goes, it's kind of nice to just come in and do one thing.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, that's something I've actually been dealing with where I'm like, I could go somewhere else, I could go make more money, but like I have a pretty low stress job. And like I come in, I do it, and pretty much that's it. And that's the only expectation for the most part. And it's like, all right, like there's something kind of to be said about the simplicity of just having that luxury, I guess, of just kind of knowing that like what you do is what you do, and that's it. You just do it good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I get a lot of security with that. So I mean it is definitely very refreshing to hear somebody be like, yeah, we had success and it was good enough for me. And I feel like it could have been like 50 records.
Yeah.
Would have been fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I just as a whole, and we keep kind of saying it, so I guess this is a good spot to start wrapping this up. But it's just one of those where it's interesting. It will be interesting to see where the band kind of goes once everything kind of picks back up. If there is still, I don't want to say a demand, but if there's still, the fandom of the band where people will kind of forgive the last album that maybe they didn't, like and kind of fell off from, and just remember that like the times and the music that they did love from this band, and if they'll be able to have that fandom support them and kind of bring them back to where they can have kind of a second chance at a career with this. So I'm really interested to see what, the new record sounds like, the EP that apparently is also going to be coming out at some point. The fact that they have so much music just, kind of planning on releasing has me really excited for the future of what Stabbing Westward will be in 2020, or I guess more importantly maybe 2021. All of that aside, though, if you would like to keep up with Stabbing Westward, it's pretty easy. It's pretty much Stabbing Westward on everything. However, Facebook and Twitter, it's Stabbing West WRD. I guess someone maybe had the A, so they had to get clever with it and figure out a new way around that. Chris himself, as you heard at the end, does not have any socials, so I don't have anything like that I need to plug. But someone who does have socials is Dan, and he can tell you where he can be found on them.
Well, yeah, I do have socials, so I can be found. Let's see, I have a Gmail account, discussmetaldan@gmail.com, Twitter at discussmetaldan. It's kind of a theme there, but on Facebook, I'm just under plain old Daniel Terry, not Discuss Metal Dan, because that'd be kind of weird, right? Like commenting on my grandma's videos and being like, "Hey, I'm Discuss Metal Dan." I don't know. It'd be weird. So yeah, I'm just Daniel Terry on Facebook. But you can find me and my other not quite as congested voice over at discussmetal.com. I've got like 12, 13 podcasts over there.
And if you would like to keep up with all things this podcast, it is simple enough. Go to brewspeakpod.com. Everything you will possibly want to know or look at related to the podcast is there. That's why it's a central hub. So just go there. If you would like to support us monetarily, you can go to patreon.com/brewspeakpod. There is some sweet perks. There is some swag that you can get and some episodes that you can get as well. And speaking of swag, if you would like to support our sponsors, we have a ton of them. We have On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point. Can't wait to get another haircut so I can actually utilize my pomade again. And I got to get us guys to, have our best looking faces present and put forward. I don't know. Whatever you want to, however you want to interpret that. Just buy the product. BSP15. Save some money. Speaking of saving some money, if you want to head over to rockabilia.com, you can go use our code BREW15 and get 15% off your total purchase order. They have over 500,000 items in their online store, ranging from just about anybody we've had on this podcast. There is actually a Stabbing Westward t-shirt. I think it's a ladies shirt, though. So unfortunately, Dan and I, in theory couldn't wear it, but
I might be able to.
yeah, you'd have to cut the sleeves off because the sleeves are a giveaway that it's a women's cut.
Oh, well, you know, women work out too.
That's true. But yeah, they have a Stabbing Westward shirt. Pretty much any guest that we've had on this podcast, there's something for them. They have Testament gloves. They have a Lamb of God candle. They have pop culture stuff. You know, I've seen a House t-shirt. I think they have a handful, like I think a Jaws, some like tank tops and so forth. Like whatever they have, you know, you can think of it, they probably have it. And you don't have to worry about the integrity of the quality of the garments. It's 100% guaranteed, and they're 100% officially licensed through the bands and the avenues that they have them through. They're 100% licensed. So not only are you getting cool swag, but you know that it's not going to tear on you or wash and fade very quickly. And that's important when you're spending your hard-earned money on new clothes. So head on over there. Let them know we're sending you. Use our code BREW15. Save 15% off your total purchase order. And last but not least is... And last but not least is God. Why can't I think of it? There we go. And last but not least is Jesus Christ. And last but not least is the Bean Bastard. Go get you some delicious coffee at the Bean Bastard. Facebook and Instagram at the Bean Bastard. I just saw on their Instagram page earlier today they're doing local pickups from their store and stuff, so you can order online and go pick it up the next day, which I think is pretty cool for a small independent coffee company to be able to do such a thing.
Yeah, I think it's pretty legit.
And for the Brutally Speaking podcast, I am John.
And I am Dan.
And we will talk to you all next week.
Yeah, we will.
All right. Turn all this shit off, switch my microphones, and do the thing. I'm going to go ahead and just log off of Skype now.
Do the thing.
Bop. All right.
We're gone, and now we're back. Yay. I can't hear you at all out of that thing, dude. Don't really want to know how long that's been going on.
All right, so that should be that. I will plug my headphones into this.
That's cool.
All right.
What's up, Alex? Talked to that dude like 8 times today.
Hey,
what's up, James?
Hey, I like your Godzilla poster.
Oh, thank you. It's kind of annoying. It keeps falling off the wall, and like I'm using masking tape to hold it up, which is really crappy, but that's a pretty common print. So I guess if I ever screw it up, I could always like get it like, I don't know, beautiful looking.
I just picked up this bad boy. Hold on. Here's the Mothra original poster up here.
Oh, that's cool.
And that one's gigantic. And then I have on my desk here, not hung up yet, we have a Gamera versus Giron poster.
That's awesome.
So you're right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, dude. I've actually behind me. I don't know if you can see it or not. No, you can't. But I've got a Destroyer and Godzilla dueling it out on my desk for all eternity.
Love it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think I've got that Mothra movie on VHS somewhere too, but I have to look through a bunch of boxes. I used to have all those kaiju movies on VHS and slowly building the Blu-ray collection.
Oh, nice. Are these boxes on the background from John Wick? What is happening?
yes. Yep.
Okay.
Parabellum.
All right. Parabolum? Yes.
Parabol.
It's not a Tool song.
You got to listen to it backwards.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a song on Bridget because Bridget likes Being as an Ocean, so she listens to that one record where they have that song that's backwards, and I'm always like, the fuck was the point of this? Like, you can't, like, it's not like it's a CD where you, like, people have CDs and you just listen to it backwards. Like, you have to go to YouTube and find it so you can hear that the way it's supposed to be played, like frontwards. But whenever that album comes on, I'm always like, this album sucks.
Yeah.
I'm just also not really a fan of that band.
I mean, tell us how you really feel.
Well, I mean, if you like slam poetry over, I guess aggressive music.
I kind of do, but it's okay.
I feel like I could take that Jonah Hill slam poetry thing from 22 Jump Street and put it over one of their songs, and it would work.
That'd be cool.
Love it. Yes. So what's up?
So the whole reason we wanted to have you on is you actually just released a new podcast
Yeah,
yesterday.
yesterday.
How
Feels like
long?
longer.
I was gonna say, I know, like in the interviews themselves, like you're kind of like saying, like for reference points, we did this interview in April, we did this one in whatever. How long had you been working on it?
We started pitching episodes in December, and we started
Oof.
recording in January.
Wow.
But they didn't all happen like one a month or anything. Like sometimes, like Bert from the Used, I think we pitched like a dozen times, and we scheduled it in February, and then March, and then finally did it in April. So there's a lot of hurry up and wait involved.
Such is life with
Yes.
Oh man, it's so funny how professional it all sounds. We started pitching ideas for episodes and stuff. Dude, me and John are just like, "Hey, we doing this tonight?" Yeah. I guess so.
Yeah, I mean that's a much easier way to do it, for the record. So I think that you're onto something here. My way is much more difficult.
Well, perfection takes a long time. We don't really shoot for perfection, but we do try some semblance of professionality. Is professionality word? I'm sorry, dude. I'm like really sick, so my brain is like totally not where it should be.
No, you're good. So I wanted really bad to have a show that had a beginning and an end for my own sanity, because I have another podcast that's like 217 episodes deep, and that's like too much for me.
Oof.
I wanted to be able like right now. I mean, I'm pretty heavy in promotion for the next month probably, but like I don't have to worry about recording a podcast for season 2 until like September. So I'm just like, all right, I'm just chilling. I got some offers. We have some guests, but I'm not recording anything right now. And me and the editor are both just taking our time.
That's
Must
cool.
be so nice to have an editor you could just like send the thing to.
It is super nice.
It was honestly the hardest part of the whole process. It was like I knew what I wanted the show to be. I was like I could hear it in my head. Like I have a reference podcast I always talk about called Boomtown that's about oil refineries in Texas. It's super good. And when I was listening to it, I was like, man, I'd love a podcast that sounds like this podcast sounds and flows like it does. But I don't have the patience to edit because I hate editing. So my friend Landon, one day we were in the car pre-COVID, and he was just like, I love editing. And I was like, oh, buddy. Do I have an offer for you?
You will be paid in so much exposure.
Yeah, well, no, I actually paid him. I paid him real cash money because we used to do video when I was in blogging more. I used to do videos back in the early days of YouTube and all that jazz. And my best friend was my video guy, and we would hang out sometimes, and he'd be so annoyed with me, and I'd be like, "What's wrong?" And he's like, "I know that you're just now seeing me, but I've been staring at your stupid face for 12 hours, and I'm just like, I'm over it." And I was like, "Oh." Okay, so like for Landon, I was like, he's the editor. I was like, okay, I got to pay this guy because he has to listen to my stupid voice for like 6 times longer than I do.
Jeez, you can't let that get out that you're paying your editor.
I know. I'm breaking the thing. I paid almost everybody on the show. Actually.
No, it's cool. I just can't have I can't have my guy beating down the door being like, "Where's my money, Dan?"
Well, if it helps, he was like, whatever you can pay me helps. So
there you go.
It wasn't a fixed rate or anything. But also he does other editing. So I wanted to be the priority. I was like, if I slide him a 20, I can move to the front of the editing line.
There you go.
Anyways, what's your question? Hit me.
So, listening to the podcast itself, and I think I still have one more episode to go. But something I was kind of wondering, because I know one day I was like sort of near your house. I think it was either at Founders or Tin Can, and I was like, "Yo, like pop over for a drink." And you're like, "Oh, I don't drink," and so what was interesting is not necessarily that, but thinking about the podcast itself. What made you want to do a recovery podcast? How did you find your way to that idea and that concept? Is it something that you've experienced, personally with something, or was it more of like just kind of a peripheral thing that you've noticed in the industry since you've been a part of it for so long, doing Under the Gun and so forth?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. I mean, when I was doing Under the Gun and in my heavy music blogging days, I definitely covered addiction to some extent. But what really the precipice for the show was that last summer I was hanging out with my buddy Anthony Green from Circus Survive in Detroit, and one night before his show, he was doing push-ups and I was just talking, and I was like, I'm trying to come up with an idea for a podcast that I could do that's like a season of something and then make more of them. And this at the time I was listening to a show called The History of Stand-Up. It's like the history of stand-up comedy. There's 2 seasons. It's fantastic. And I was talking to him about it, and he goes, it would be really fun to talk to people in recovery. He's like, well, not fun, but they always have good stories. So you should do that. And you should call it High Notes. And I was like, that's a really good idea. And then, like most good ideas, I didn't do anything with it for like 6 months. And then in November of last year, Anthony relapsed because he himself was in recovery at the time. And when he texted me about it, I checked on him and made sure he was okay. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, I guess we have to do that podcast now because we need to talk about these things, buddy. Because I realized, like, as somebody that I considered a friend in the music business, there's like this whole side to him that I don't know and I don't understand, and I was concerned about him. And so it was like my 2 worlds colliding, because as a journalist, I used to like be so hungry for the scoop about people on drugs, Like I remember we used to get emails from people that would see guys in bands doing drugs and be like, hey, so-and-so here's a video of so-and-so shooting up in the studio. And I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. But it was always like, this weird tabloid journalism thing. It never sat right with me. And then being concerned with Anthony, I was like, I want to do this show. And then my beautiful partner, Brittany, has been in recovery for over a decade herself. And so I was like talking to her, because I was like, can I, as a guy that hasn't done this stuff, talk about these things, and how do I do it? And she kind of pointed me in the right direction and did a bunch of research. And so I don't know, it also just fascinates me, because I feel like we don't really, there's 2 ways that we look at people that have addictions, right? There's the people that are afflicted with this terrible disease called addiction, who would be so great if it wasn't for addiction. And then there are people who are junkies that we all think will just deserve to overdose and die. And it's like this really weird 2 sides of a coin thing that exists. And often the people that we feel badly about have the same exact addictions that the people that we are like, oh, but addiction's plaguing them. So I wanted to, kind of like even the playing field and be like, listen, they all have the same disease. It just affects all of them differently. And maybe if we talk about it at length, we could, generate some empathy, or at least some understanding, and help other people, feel that way about people in their own lives.
Do you think that, like, in having these conversations and talking about these things openly, do you feel like that leads to like a certain level of accountability too? Because I would assume that these I would assume that these relationships obviously will last, beyond just a conversation.
Yeah.
And so, like, I feel like in that regard, that's got to lead to a certain amount of accountability there.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because one of the things that we talk about on a couple of the episodes is this idea that like if we talk about Bad Wolves, they have that big song right now called Sober, and Tommy's on the podcast. Well, when you write a song like Sober, you basically open the door for everyone that likes your band to come up to you in the street and be like, hey, let me tell you about my horrible addiction. Like, let me tell you about like hitting rock bottom and these terrible things that happen to me. And like, how does that make an artist feel? And, for some people it's accountability, and for some people it's like this weight that almost drags them down. But I think in the context of this show, hopefully, it does generate some accountability. Something that happened today they haven't really talked about anywhere yet. I texted John about it earlier, but I actually got an email this morning from a woman who had already listened to the entire season, which, bless her. But she was like, I'm a mother of 2 who's a recovering heroin addict, and I've been having a really hard time. And then I heard your podcast yesterday. I listened to the whole season, and it really gave me a sense of hope. And so I texted it to Anthony and a couple of the other guests whose numbers I have ready to go. And I was just like, hey, look at this message that we got this morning. And they were all like, holy shit, this is amazing. So I think you're right. By like talking about it openly, it changes the kind of the dynamic of the accountability, where it's not like you have to entertain me and be honest with me. It's more like we just have to be honest with each other.
Do you ever worry that like it's like what that toll takes on you getting all, because I think the hardest part is that, you put yourself out there and everybody feels comfortable telling you their story. Does that take any kind of like toll on you after a while.
Yeah, there's a much rumored episode that we're not releasing from the first season that I recorded, and
Yeah.
just because it didn't work out with like the guest and what we talk about and like some of the things that they said, it just isn't fit to be released. But when we
Gotcha.
finished recording, like the version, most episodes that we release are like 30 to 40 minutes long, but the actual conversation is like 75 minutes long, and this one was like 2 hours. And I remember when I was done, I walked out into the living room and I was just like, I want to take a shower. Like, I just need to like sit down and like decompress, because of like, it gets really heavy sometimes. But the point of the show isn't to like make addiction exploitative. Like we usually tell there's at least one really horrible story in almost every episode, but I'm never like, so what was it like to shove a needle in your arm? You know what I mean? Like we try not to make it like anything that's too over the top like that. We try to keep it to, as comfortable as the guest will be. So that kind of keeps me from it. But it is heavy just to like, hear somebody that I've always looked up to or that I've considered a friend tell me something about themselves that I've never known, and be like, oh, I didn't realize that like you're carrying this.
Right.
Mhm.
Oof
is right.
Yeah.
I think something that like I've kind of hit on a couple of times on the show is, and I think you kind of said it to, I can't remember if it was Tommy or if it was Anthony, but sort of kind of touching on what you were saying, where it's like, you reveal yourself in these lyrics, and so many people like identify with them, and then they're just coming to you, and I don't, punishing is not the term I want to use, but they're basically coming up to you and unloading like all their grief, all their burdens, all this shit. And basically it's like, now you have to take that with you in addition to everything else that you have going on in your own life. And it's like, that's so hard, because it's like, imagine doing that for like 30-40 days. And then it's like, when do you get to like kind of decompress from all that? I mean, it's like, talk about therapists basically needing their own therapist, because all they're doing is taking on and trying to work through someone else's problems. But who do they go talk to with their own? Because I would imagine it's very exhausting to have to go through something like that mentally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the story, I don't know if it actually makes the cut in the episodes, but a story that I would use in conversations to kind of set up the question is that there's this old story about when the Wonder Years were on Warped Tour, they did meet and greets every single day. And then one day a kid came up to them and was like, thank you so much, I love your band. And then before they left, they were like, hey, I want you to have this, and gave the band the razor that they had been using to cut themselves. And then the band stopped doing meet and greets like on Warped Tour, because I think you hit that breaking point where it's like, you always know because people are telling you, but it's a different thing for somebody to be like, listen, like, I've drugged this through my flesh, and now I want you to have it because you stopped me from doing it. Like that, that makes it almost too real in like the wrong way.
Yeah.
So I kind of use that as an example. And though none of the guests have a story like that, almost all of them, whether it's in the episode or not, were like, yeah, people tell us things, because they do meet and greets before the show most of the time. So it's like 5 o'clock before the Sleeping with Sirens show. And then Nick meets 20 kids, and 8 of them will tell him some horrific story about their life. And then he has to like go on stage and be like, everything's cool, rock and roll. It's pretty crazy.
Well, that's like something I was kind of talking, and it really was the Color Morale when they put out No Hope, where I started to feel like they were the first really to kind of, I don't want to say buck the trend, but like, it was Garrett changed his style of singing. It was more raw and real. It wasn't, so processed and so forth, and something he couldn't do night in and night out. But the interesting thing about it was like, like lyrically, he kind of changed up a little bit more of what he was talking about on that record. I think Silver Lining, where he's talking about like literally the beginning of the song is like, how am I supposed to write about hope with catchy hooks and melodies to make you sing along? And then he's like talking about how he tried to write the whole record before he even like wrote any of the songs. And, it was seeing that record and seeing how it resonated with kids, and seeing so many kids coming up to Garrett, especially Garrett. But it seemed like after that, like that was kind of a shift in the scene where you just started noticing seemingly everyone was just like, oh, and I hate to say that it's a trend, but it feels like it became the thing where everyone's like, oh, is that the thing we're doing now? We're talking about how fucked up we all are. Oh, okay, cool. I'm sad, or I had a shitty childhood, and let's make a video that kind of showcases that or whatever. And then it's just like, has it become a trend now versus has it become a trend, and is it doing a disservice to those that are actually trying to use their platform to get out this message as a result? What do you
I
think?
don't know. I think that's a good question. I've been, as a adult scene kid these days, I think a lot about the vacuous nature of like late 2000s scene music. So I think there's this shift that happens in the early 2010s where everything gets like super emotional, and then it kind of splits again. Like recently it's kind of split, and there are some people that like doubled down on being as real as humanly possible, and then we're seeing this other kind of tangent of music that's like kind of going a little bit more superfluous again, where we're getting a little bit more silly and egotistical and braggadocio. I don't know that it does a disservice. I think there was a period where maybe it did, but only because like I think we all have like a cup of how much we can take in terms of like you can only watch so many depressing movies or so many depressing TV shows or so many depressing songs. And at some point, like you need a band that's just like, why don't we not? Like why don't we just escape for a little bit? That's why like I think some people go to like some of the bands like an Attila band, they come out of nowhere and they're like, you know what, we're not gonna talk about that sad shit. We're gonna be like, let's just party and have a good time and like escape our problems for a bit. You need a balance. So if it does a disservice to the movement of being more honest, I think it's only that sometimes it's too much of a good thing.
Well, and if I could fits right into your addiction thing too.
If I could throw my 2 cents into, I think without thinking of it as being a trend necessarily, I think that there's an uncomfortable amount of people in the world right now that are hurting, and we're hurting then. And I think it's really hard for the average person to compartmentalize that. So like I feel like much more people are, like because I did an interview, I guess probably a couple months ago with Mike Perez of No Bragging Rights, and they're a band that's like very outspoken about like depression and suicide and things like that, and we were talking about how like support exhaustion, where there's so many people that are out there hurting, and having issues, whether it be addiction or suicidal thoughts or horrible depression, or in certain cases a huge combination of all of those things. And I think that you hear it in and out, and you do start thinking that like, oh, well, it's got to just be a bandwagon that people are jumping on. Or that everybody's trying to say the same things because maybe that's what sells, or maybe that's but like I think the reality is that there's just an unfathomable amount of pain that is out there, and I think the party bands, the fun bands, I think that they definitely serve a really good purpose in that too, and that it gives us a break from that support exhaustion, and we can all just kind of have a good time. And at the same time, it also can lift spirits of people, because I think the hardest part about being real is that you can be super real, but eventually you're going to get to a point where somebody's going to hear that realness and maybe they identify with it, and maybe they get a positive positive resolution out of it. But I also find that, when you're wallowing in your own shit, other people will wallow with you. So I think I think it's just an interesting dichotomy of like, I can be ultra serious, but I might also drag people down into my own pit with me, or I can be super happy and fun, but then turn around and like maybe seem like you're ignoring things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think, there's some people are better equipped to write catchy songs and talk about their sadness. You know what I mean? Some people are equally sad, but like, they try to put it to pen to paper and it just doesn't work the same way. It's a weird thing, because there's something we've been joking about internally at High Notes and stuff is we're all really into mindfulness, and there's a lot of sayings that's like a lot of existence is learning to live with suffering. And the show is kind of like about that. It's like, let's all talk about the fact that we're all suffering and how we can kind of make it a little less insufferable in a lot of ways. But you have to do it really well, because I actually, I review movies in my free time, and I watched a film yesterday that was like about the same idea of like everyone is suffering and we're all going to die, but it was so bad. And I was like, I relate to what they're saying here. I understand where they're going, but like this artist, this storyteller doesn't have the gift to paint a good picture with this idea. And it's like some people just have it or you don't. What else you got, Sean? Hit me.
Hit him with those hard questions.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was funny. I mean, it's sort of amusing because it's like this isn't your first podcast and it's not your first like foray into any of this stuff. But I did find it amusing that it was like the first day your podcast comes out and you get a headline out of it.
Yeah. We made 217 episodes of the other show. Maybe 5 headlines. First, yeah. I've gotten more at least reposted press releases in the last 24 hours, and more messages from people that really related to the show, and then maybe anything else I've ever done. But I've been saying in other interviews that I do think that it's the best thing I've ever made. So if it took all of this to make this thing, and I really like this thing, like, like something with the other podcast or any of my other stuff that I do, the YouTube channel, the blogs, it's like, it's work a lot. And this is work, but it's like work where at the end of the day, I'm like, yeah, but this might actually help somebody. And it's not just me being a smart ass. Or like me, acting like I know what I talk about. Like this, I definitely don't know what I'm talking about some of the time, but I rely on the guests, and we have a few professionals in the field that I kind of bounce ideas off of, or I'll text somebody in recovery and be like, hey, we're talking about this right now. How would you talk about that in a way that people can understand that haven't done that? Because like going into the show, I was like, we're going to talk about cocaine and weed and alcohol. And then like the first episode that we did, like the first guest was like, yeah, so I was doing crystal meth at 16. And I was like, not prepared for this. We're going way deeper than I thought we were going to go. And I had to like go and do all the research on the topic and like learn it. So, whatever.
What is, because obviously you were saying like, your partner has gone through this, you're talking about something that you've not experienced. What is something that you have found to be, I don't know if relatable is the word I want to necessarily use, but something that you have taken away yourself that you're like, wow, that's actually. So in the chats and in the interviews and the episodes themselves, like you kind of talk about how there's specific phrases that a lot of these people have kind of taken from their time in AA or the various groups that they've gone to for their recovery. And there's always like a phrase, and you've kind of been like, oh, they're so catchy because like there's just like little nuggets, and it's like such a throwaway sentence basically, but you're like, oh, there's so much like knowledge and wisdom in that. Yeah. What's something that in doing these interviews and hearing some of these stories and so forth that you have taken away that you weren't expecting to as a result of these?
I guess my biggest one, the one that I'd never heard before, because I've heard a lot of them. Sometimes you just don't realize that they're from recovery, right? Like one day at a time. Like I don't really think of that as a recovery catchphrase, but it is. That's where it comes from. The idea of like every day you just decide not to drink, and if you mess up, then you just messed up today. You didn't mess up forever, and so on and so forth. But for me, the one that I've kind of been obsessing over lately is the idea of taking care of your side of the street. So like I can't control what anyone else does or what anyone else thinks of me or the things I'm making or the things I'm doing, but I can take care of myself and what I'm doing and the people I care about as much as I can. And like focusing on that is enough, because like my thing, I was talking to somebody about this today. I actually had a journalist that I kind of like blocked me on Twitter earlier this week because they don't think high notes is a good idea. They think that it's exploiting addiction to promote a podcast, when in reality it's exploiting podcasts to promote recovery. It's kind of the opposite, but they didn't feel that way and they blocked me. And I was like, I got this beautiful message from this mom who's like in recovery and like the show helped her. And I was still just like, yeah, but that one person blocked me because they don't get it. And like, why don't they like me? And it was like driving me crazy. And I thought of that phrase today, like just taking care of my side of the street. I was like, listen, I made the best thing I could make and I really like it and people seem to like it and it's going to make a difference in their lives. And even if I don't have another message about it, I received at least 3 today from people that were like, it really helped me. And I was like, okay, like 6 months of work is worth it for to make that positive impact. And like, I can't really control the rest.
It's really weird to hear journalists think that like of doing a podcast is exploitive. I mean, isn't journalism? I mean, and this is just a general statement, but isn't journalism to some degree exploitative by nature? I mean, not like, and it doesn't necessarily. I say exploited, like I know that's like a negative way of saying it, but like,
Yeah.
There is a certain like if you write something or you expose something or you like I just don't understand that. Like it is exploitive to a certain extent.
Mhm.
Like you would have to have that. So I don't understand how a podcast is different than any other form of journalistic media.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's my whole point. It's like, okay, so what are the like? How do I talk about this thing and it not on some level be exploitative, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can be like it's bad. Everyone knows it's bad. The point of the podcast is to explain like why it's bad, like why it made these people's lives the way it did, and why they had to get better, and like why you should do the same. It's like the only way to discuss anything at length is to be a little bit exploitative about it. Like we have to pick it apart,
Right.
you know, for some people it's a touchy subject, and I respect that. You know, for some people they just, you know, we got, you know, the Me Too movement right now. You know, there's a lot of people that are telling their truth, and it's beautiful, but there are some people who are like, you know, is it right that people share their story and then they get a lot of, you know, followers and attention and likes and all this stuff because of the platform they choose to share it on? It's like, okay, yeah, but the only way that we can work through this time is to talk about it. So you know, you gotta accept that that's going to happen.
Out of curiosity, is in dealing with some of the stories that you're kind of like walking away from, like I know who you're referring to and the one that didn't air. As you're going through that, have you found that this has allowed you to connect with your partner in a completely different way than you were expecting?
Yeah, I mean, maybe sometimes I come out and I'll be like, hey, so today we talked about this. Or you ever say something to your partner and like you think it's profound and they're like, obviously. Like that's that's how, yeah. And water is wet. I've had a lot of those moments where I've been like, you know, I never thought of this before. And Bernie will just be like, yeah, that's how it is. That's how it's always been since the dawn of time. That is not new information. You're just discovering it right now. But she's also been really helpful just because it's one of those things that like, even in talking to her, like I've known this about her since we met, and in working on this, I would get to come to her and be like, hey, so I'm going to talk to this person and here's what they've been through. Is it okay if I ask them X, Y, and Z? Like, if I want to ask them about this, how do I do it in a way that's not going to get the wrong point across, or B, make them like be like, oh, you know what? I actually really liked heroin. I should go try that again. Like, how do I talk to somebody about doing drugs without making them want to do drugs? So she's been really helpful for that. So in a way, it has brought us closer, if only because I think it's made me better at communicating with her, or maybe I just understand her better because I'm like, oh, you always are right. Yeah. you tend to know better. She's not watching this right now. I know for a fact I checked, so I can say
that. My wife's upstairs, so yeah, I gotta proceed with caution on that one. But I totally get it, yeah, because I say things all the time that are like, yeah, wow, did you ever think about it like that? And shit. And her favorite response is, yeah, I told you that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, well, obviously, that's what it is.
Right. So it's, you know.
And sometimes she helps me go a little deeper because I'll be like, I want to ask them this. And she'll be like, yeah, but that is like, that's a branch of the core of the thing that you want to talk about. So like, ask them this. And I'll be like, okay. And I'll be in the podcast and I'll ask it and it'll go really well. And I'm like, oh, damn. Like you got this. She was right. And then I'll give her credit after the fact. I'll be like, I didn't mention you, but know that I said the thing you told me to say.
Do you feel that some of that is going through at least this season, do you feel that this will allow you to be better? Sounds terrible, but do you think the next season will be better than this one because you have this that you can build upon and know how to kind of work your way through the questions and so forth?
Yeah, well, at least I know what I'm doing now. You know, like by the time we got to editing, I was still editing the head episode on Sunday of this week. It got down to the wire, which is that's also just my character. Like I'm put myself into a little corner, then I'll finish the project thing. But I definitely was working on the head episode, and I was like, okay, The Bert episode was the first one we finished, and that one took me like 4 days. And the head episode I did in like a day. And I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing now. Like I know where we're going. I know the structure of the show. I know what I want it to be and what it looks like. So I think so, but there's also the idea of like I can't just do 8 more of the same thing. So I've got to like, we're gonna change it. So for season 2, I've gotten a lot of offers. It's funny when you're pitching a show that doesn't exist, it's really hard to get people to say yes. And then once people know what it is, they're like, oh, I have a lot of guests that you should do for this show. And so I think we're going to try some things. Like this season, I was like, I want to get these people because I like them. B, I know who they are for the most part. So I know I can talk to them. And C, I just think that like, I want to kind of hit this very specific niche of people like 20 to 35-year-old, 20 to 40-year-old people who are into alternative and hard rock music and may, at least are around people that drink or do drugs or whatever it happens to be. But for the next season, we already have some classic, some more iconic rock or metal people involved. We have a top 40 rock superstar involved, and we have probably we're going to do a first foreign guest because I got a really interesting email today that was like, why don't you have anyone from any other countries? And I was like, that's a really good point. Okay. I don't even know what it's like to do all these drugs in another country, which is fascinating to me. So I'm like, all right, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's get a guest on the show who's from like Norway or Germany or somewhere. Yeah. What's it like there? You guys have different drug laws than us. How does that affect things? How can we go deeper in this conversation, but still like entertain the core audience? So there's going to have to be somebody that's like a Warped Tour alumni in the mix. But I think that now that we've established a show, hopefully people will just listen to it, because I didn't expect people to listen to the whole thing. The whole reason we dropped all 8 episodes at once is I was like, people are going to say, I like Head from Korn. I don't know who any of these other people are. I'm going to listen to the Head episode and I'm going to bounce. And that's certainly happened, I'm sure. But there's a lot of people are like, I listened to all 8 episodes. And I'm just like, really? Well, okay, I guess. Sure. That's awesome. Thank you.
No, that's cool, and that's got to be hard, just to plan it all out to that extent ahead of time and not really be sure, how it's going to be received.
Yeah, it's like, because that was the also thing. I was like, because I paid Landon, the editor, out of pocket. We made notebooks, which I foolishly don't have sitting here at my desk to show off. I paid for all the stuff that's part of the show out of my own pocket. Even though Holic sponsors the show, I paid for everything myself. And there was a time when I was working on it where I was like, we might get this out and nobody's going to listen, or they're going to listen and I'm going to be so off mark. People are going to be like, this is really bad. You did not do a good job. But it's one of those, I think it's just one of those things where it's like, if you're really into it, like I was really interested in having these conversations. So as long as we keep that excitement going and like the guests that we're kicking around for season 2 or that we've already talked to, it's like, oh hell yeah, like let's definitely have these conversations, which is a weird thing to say. It's weird to get excited to ask somebody about the worst thing they've ever done.
Yeah.
It's weird to be like, oh my God, Head, I love the new Korn album. I love, I love all the records, but let's talk about, getting meth shipped to you in Germany. Like, let's get really weird.
Let's really rip that scab open and just and get in there.
I had a conversation today where I asked a publicist, I was like, is this individual sober? And they were like, I think so. And I was like, they're like, do you want me to ask? And I was like, I'd like them to do the show if the answer is yes, but if you can find out in a way that isn't so direct, maybe, I don't know. It's a weird thing to ask people.
Totally. Well, and do you feel any amount of pressure, doing this? Because obviously the first season, is doing well for you. Do you feel any type of pressure to kind of like try to top the first season, or is it more just we'll kind of just take it how it comes?
Well, that's the problem with guests, right? Because you get a few offers for a bigger guest maybe, and while you're like, holy crap, it's blah blah blah. I'm like, well, is blah 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 really going to take the show further, or is it just like, oh, you're going to talk to that iconic addict about the thing that they've, written books about and made movies about and made documentaries about and can be seen talking about this thing everywhere? Or is the better move to find somebody like Anthony, who's, always written about his addictions, but never really talks about them at length, and getting him to talk about it at length and then like go deeper there? Because I think that there's advantages to both. So that's the thing that we're trying to keep in check with the new season. Because like on this season, I would say that the least known artist is Haley Butters. They're an amazing independent artist, and they run a great Twitter account called This Band Fucks that I think more people know than know their music probably. But they're probably my favorite episode of the show because it's a story that I'd never heard before. So when I'm talking to them and they're telling me about it, I'm just like, holy shit! Like, I'm talking to what is essentially a stranger to most people, and we're going this deep into their personal story. And I think that's far more fascinating than if I were to get like David Lee Roth on the show and talk about Van Halen. It just isn't the same thing to me.
Yeah, totally. And I think personal goals, like personal bucket list guests, for me always come off as more important, more so than like how well the episode's going to do. Like there's always kind of a sense of that, but like I don't know. Like it's so funny. I always joke with people that I knocked all my bucket list guests off pretty quickly because all the bands I listened to were like so underground that they're like, holy crap, what do you want to talk to me for?
Yeah.
But it can absolutely be daunting whenever you get like that one guest, but then you'll talk to somebody that's lesser known, and you almost feel more like complete, like you did a better job with that one.
Exactly. Yeah. And I have a bucket. I'm like you. My bucket list of artists that I like are really obscure. That I'm like, I can't find them on Facebook as like personal accounts. And so I asked my friends, like, do you know what happened to the guitar player from the 1997? And there's like, no, nobody knows what happened to that guy. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, maybe one day he'll pop back up.
I get a number for his shack in the woods. Yeah.
Yeah. Or you're like, oh, that guy's not anywhere. You're like, oh, he's just off the grid. Okay, cool. And then the other side effect is that we made this show that is like really structured and has a narrative flow and like it goes somewhere. And so, obviously I have other ideas for like podcasts that are like narratively driven. So there's a part of me that's like, okay, well now when do I start the other thing? How do I find time to do this? And meanwhile, Brittany is like, could you just take like a week to enjoy this thing? And I'm like, yeah, I probably should.
Yeah, that's my next question. As a person that also has multiple podcasts, how do you prioritize?
Well, the last 2 weeks I just did this, but otherwise, Inside Music is a cool show and it's fun. And, it's a show that's going on for so long that it's easy to schedule guests. And if I want to do it, we can do it. But that's why we give ourselves so much runway. So season 2 of High Notes will be out in December. We'll start recording in September. And this time Landon will be on board to edit from the beginning. So as soon as we're done with something, he can edit it and we'll just like chug them out. We'll have a little bit more time to run with it. Cause this time he didn't come on the show until April or May, maybe. And so by then I'd already recorded all the episodes and I had to like wait for him to like go through 10 hours of content and get it all back to me. And like, he has a life. So this time we're going to be a little bit more involved in it together. We're going to do some bonus episodes between now and then that we're already like recording, but that kind of takes the priority. Plus we feel like this is more important. And luckily my job allows me to do them as the job. So I'll just, if this does really well, we can get bigger guests for this show. So my boss is like, focus on the one that's going to have bigger guests.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Hit me, John. You're very quiet.
Oh, I mean, this is what you do sometimes. When people are talking, you just let them go.
Yeah. It's really hard.
It's kind of funny. Like I was listening back to the one I just did with Tom, but like I realized like because he just started a podcast recently, but I realized like he can talk, but sometimes you got to like get him going before he'll kind of really get going and talking at length. And so like I was like, fuck, man, I'm talking so much, but I was like, but I could see verbally like he's just kind of like, yeah, and it's like, all right, I need you to like kind of pick up and get on something. So it's this weird thing sometimes like where you realize that's kind of the magic of editing at times, like where it's like you can make people who maybe didn't say a whole lot make it seem like they were more interactive.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know. It was funny. Like when I listened to the first episode, I was like, oh wait, you don't actually hear you asking any questions. Like that was kind of interesting. Like I was like, oh, I'm not used to that. It's like, it is an interview based podcast of sorts. Like you said, it's more of a narrative thrown in as well. And I was just like, oh, like, that's an interesting way to do a podcast, I guess. Like, it wasn't what I was expecting, but like it kind of did make me wonder where it's like how often, like, because Dan and I sometimes we'll talk about like, okay, like what's the format? Okay, like we talk the episode. Sometimes we deviate, we don't talk about an episode. Like there's an episode, I think I sent it to you. It's one that we haven't been able to air because the publicist was like,
Nope. Yep.
Yep. It was like, yeah, you can't put this out. And the sad part is it's not because like it was them trashing someone or whatever. It was because of how raw and honest they were about something that they went through. And then as a result, Dan and I like opened up on the outro for it. Like it's a long episode, but it was like one when we were done. Like I remember just being like, I think this might be like my favorite episode we've ever done. Like I can't wait to put it out. And then it was like when I sent him the text I got from the person where they're like, yeah, some management and like everybody's like, yeah, you can't put that out, or like I'll basically get fired.
I know, dude. And I wanted to be like such a cavalier, like put it out anyway. They can't tell us what to do. Da, 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 da. But then like, I don't want this dude to like get in trouble, you know? Like, yeah.
It's yeah, no, I purposely didn't want there to be questions in the show. I mean, again, this goes back to loving this podcast, Boomtown, which I feel like I should get an advertising cut for at this point for how much I bring it up. But it's a podcast that I had no interest in, right? Like a podcast about the Texas oil fields has nothing that interests me in it. But I listened to the first episode, which is all about how there's a stretch of highway in Texas where like 80% of the car accidents in Texas every year happen on this stretch of highway. And I was like so hooked. And the guy probably interviews 4 or 5 people every episode for the most part. And I don't know that he ever asks a question in the narration, but he just beautifully weaves all these narratives together. And I was like, I want to do that. Plus, when you hear me ask questions, it's always like, oh yeah, that's cool. Well, on that note, blah blah blah. And this way, I sound like I know what I'm talking about from the very start. Like I can just kind of cut in, and plus we can add quips. Like in the Bird episode and in the Anthony episode specifically, there's a lot of parts where I interject with like lessons from recovery, or there's a few metaphors thrown in there to like kind of elaborate on what we're talking about, because I feel like there's a lot of people who may be young that are listening to these episodes that don't understand the concept of one day at a time. So I need to take a minute or two to like talk about what that means.
Yeah, that's something I should try. I'd probably sound a lot smarter if I heard less of myself on an interview.
It's frustrating because you have to listen to yourself the first time, and then you'll be like, "Oh, I sound like an idiot," and then you have to cut out your audio, and then come up with what you're going to say instead, and then do that like 30 times, because now you're like, "Okay, well, if I'm going to inject the narrative, it has to sound like I know what I want to say."
Right.
So yeah, it's mostly just been me in a closet. We built a recording studio behind me here in this closet where I do all the podcasting and all the video stuff, and it's all soundproof, but it's mostly just me sitting there by myself screaming profanities in between hitting record and delete.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's something. I don't know if it's awesome.
Just gotta record it all, put it to music.
Yeah, one day I'll put out all of me being like blah blah blah. Ah, come on.
Right.
One day, my mic. One day at a time. One day, the stuff on the shelf that we keep stuff on above, where I record for extra soundproofing, collapsed on me mid recording. So it was like, so it was like, and then one day at a time means crunch, 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 crunch. Good times. But I think there's like 950 narrative edits across the 8 episodes or something like that, because it takes a long time. Yeah.
I think one of my favorite things about doing this recently, because like, you know, I think everyone kind of has like the same, I mean, I'm sure you hear it all the time. Oh, I'd love to. You always hear I want to be on a podcast. Can I be on your podcast? And you're just kind of like, I'm not really at the point where like, that's what the podcast is. So sorry, but no. But the thing is, like, you know, I always hear, you know, Kevin Smith and, you know, Mark Maron and all them are like such proponents of like, oh, I just started this thing. Just start your thing. Like, and then eventually you'll be like, oh, I'm hundreds of episodes in, and you'll be surprised at who you've had and some of the conversations you've had with people that are just like raw and real. And that's why I kind of like doing this with Dan now, where it's like we record the intro and outros that you'll hear, but you can see it, like us doing it on this thing. And like I was fucking up. I couldn't remember the Bean Bastard. Like I was like, oh, our sponsor, last but not least, and I couldn't remember it. And then I did that same thing you were just saying, where I was like, oh, it's brutally, and I'm like, no, what the fuck? No, it's not. And it's like, you can see me fucking up. And I think that's funny because you can see me struggling. And like a lot of times, and Dan will see this all the time, where like, I'll just close my eyes and I have to like kind of get in the mode of like, okay, and this is the jingles and this is how we end everything and so on and so forth. Like you kind of fall into your routine. But I think there's something to be said where like, that's one of my favorite things about Marin, like when he does his intros and he'll just be like on the recent one, he was talking about something. And then he was just like, okay, is everyone good? Are we all good? Are you not good? It's okay to not be good. Just take a deep breath. Let it out. And then he starts doing that. And you can like, because his girlfriend died recently. And so like you hear him just kind of like on the verge of tears. And he's like, oh, I'm trying to hold it in. And then like you kind of are going through this with him. And I'm just like, ah, shit. And to me, it's like, I love that there's these weird ebbs and flows of their real life thrown in this. And to me, it's like, I'm going to edit me fucking up. I'm not leaving that in. But I like the fact that we're kind of being a little bit more transparent and showing that it's like, yeah, you hear the thing we do and it sounds one way, but this is how we get it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big struggle for me is like thinking about the fact that like when I'm talking, I don't ever think about like, oh, I'm on this live video or we're recording a podcast, so I need to like watch what I say to make it easier for my editor to edit what I'm saying. And I can usually tell by like the really angry glances that I get. But like it's really hard because like I'm still as many podcast. I mean, God, I've probably done like what 400 podcast episodes at this point, and I still am like, yeah, like all of that stuff, and it's ridiculous to me the amount of people that have put in time and effort to like make me actually sound good on a finished product. Like I try not to think about it because then I just feel bad and it just makes me want to quit.
That's why I have to pay Landon. I thought about it too much.
Yep.
That's what happened. Yeah.
Well, I don't really have much else to say. Like it was kind of like I said, like I know you were trying to find different avenues. I didn't know you're doing so much press first and foremost, but
I'm trying really hard. I have a podcast scheduled at the end of August. When I reached out to them to see if I could do. There's a show that I wanted to do that's about movies, but I wanted to do it, and they were like, "I can get you in at the end of August," and I was like, "Well, I guess we do press until the end of August." So that's the new goal.
Well, it's
there you go.
Nice that you have people who, in theory, want to talk to you about this thing. Like, no one's beating down our door to be like, "Hey, so like your show."
Well, that's
right.
So this is a benefit of doing a structured 8-episode series. Is all of a sudden it seems more like important. It's like a thing. You know what I mean? Like it's an event. It happened. It's out there, and people send me messages. And I actually got an email today where someone was like, "I can't wait for season 2," and I was like, "I haven't even started." Working on this took 6 months. You listen to it in one day. This is how Netflix feels when we're like we're Stranger Things.
I'm currently in the process, and like so many people are like, "Oh, this idea." I mean, it's not a fresh idea. Like I can think of like 5 other podcasts that I know exist that are on the crux of this. But my next thing is, and Dan's already kind of started, but like his idea and the way we're gonna do it is totally different. But I've decided for the next podcast because it's so much work. Like right now I was like, oh, we should do Stabbing Westward tonight. And then we can get done with Michael from Volumes. And then I was like, fuck, I'm not done editing that episode. So like, it's not even like I don't want to like talk about it. Cause like you and I might talk about something and then I'll edit it out. So like, I don't even want to do that.
Yeah.
So like now it's on me. Like I got to finish editing it. And then I have like 2 or 3 other ones that I haven't even touched yet. So I'm like, oh shit. Like now the pressure's kind of on me to get back to the point where like everything's done and all I got to do is throw the intros and outros on it. And then it's a real easy process. But doing all of that, it has informed me that the next podcast I want to do a season. And coincidentally, I want to do 8 episodes a season. It's going to be formatted like it's going to be a movie-based podcast. We're breaking down each episode per different things like directors, cult classics, comedy, horror, whatever. And then I've even picked the movies to start it. And the crux of mine was just like, because I wanted to try to do something more interactive on here, because with so much streaming, or not streaming, but a lot of like the watch videos and so forth, I wanted something that people could kind of participate in real time. And so the idea was to kind of do something sort of like Doug Loves Movies or How Did This Get Made, where it's like, or even some of the other podcasts that like watch movies. But recently, because I've had issues with like sleeping and some like back problems and so forth, like I at 36 have finally started to be like, well, let's try this weed thing. Let's see like if I can shut my brain off, because like for a lot of people like myself, I'll go to bed and as soon as I'm in the dark, I'm like thinking about something, and then my mind will like take that, and then I'm like, oh well, let's go over here, and then it's like, well then let's go over here, and then like the next thing you know, you've been awake for like 4 hours and you're like, shit, I gotta wake up in like 4 hours. Can I go to sleep? Will I get enough sleep? Will I oversleep my alarm? And then you start going down a whole nother rabbit hole. So for me, it was like this thing where I was like, let's give this a try and see how this works for me. And for me, it's something that really allows me to just chill out, be present in the moment of what's going on, and then actually get a pretty much uninterrupted like 8 hours of sleep. And I'm not saying that's for everybody, but for me,
Yeah.
it's something that works. It's a natural remedy, depending on how you feel about it. But the thing I also realized that's been kind of fun is like I wanted to do that where it's like you just get high and watch movies, and I call it highly entertaining.
Yeah.
And then you basically provide a commentary for the movie you're watching.
Smash cut to 2 years from now when John is on High Notes season 4 talking about this day in question, or like I knew that things were coming off the rails. It's okay.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the funny thing too, though. Like that, something why I kind of also wanted to have you on, because like, I've talked about how we've been passed over for guests, and even Dan today was like, oh, like there's been someone I've been going after somewhat at least once a week. Where we keep getting these email blasts like, oh, so-and-so's doing this thing and here they are, and if you want to interview them or whatever, like email us. And then I do, and they're like, oh, sorry, that person's not doing anything, and you're like,
okay. And the next week they're on your buddy's podcast, like you can tell they did it the day you sent the email.
Yeah. So it's a thing where for that, like it just kind of turns into this thing where it's like, in some instances, like, we had Tommy Victor from Prong on, and he was like, I was kind of worried about doing this, like, and I was like, oh. And I said it in the episode. I was like, "Oh, me with the big ego." I was like, "Oh, it's because I must have, like." I think we actually had Head on recently. Like that was the episode that had just dropped. So I was like, "Oh, it's probably like, oh, like this is a bigger podcast to get these kind of people. Like maybe he doesn't feel he's on that level." And then he was like, "No, like your show's about drinking, and I don't drink." And then I was like, "Oh, fuck me, man! Like, first of all, what an ego blow! Like I'm such an asshole." I was like, "Oh, it's because the show's so big," and then it's like, no, it's because of the name. And then I was like, okay, so now I got a quick damage control. And I was like, well, I mean, that's not really the crux of the show. Like that's just something the co-host and I do on either end, but like the interview is a totally separate entity, and more or less it's a fun play on the name of like being brutally honest and having honest conversations with people, which is something a lot of people tell me that like I'm pretty good at getting out of people. And so it was kind of just a play on all that. But it's kind of shocking, to me, that we still experience this, where it's like I can send you countless episodes where it's like that's not the thing we talk about in the interview. That's not even the crux of half of what I do. And even the few times it leads to a really interesting interview, like talking to Danny, aka Amigo the Devil. And I was like, oh, you used to be a brewer. You also used to be into, like, you went to culinary school. How do some of those things that you've done, how do they apply to your songwriting? It's like I find a way to like kind of introduce it in a completely different facet, other than being like, so you like getting ripped and you just came up with this song one day, like when you were hammered off your ass and picked up a banjo. Like it's not like that. And I think at times it's such a bummer to know the work that we put into, or at least me, like Dan will attest, like I'll usually come with a shitload of notebooks and questions and spend all this time preparing, and then it's like to have it be relegated to something as simple as, well, it's a drinking podcast, and it's like, but it's not. And it's really frustrating to have people do that. So I was like, it'd be kind of nice to, have you on and showcase, like Dan and I can actually have a conversation about something as serious as sobriety and recovery and so forth. And that it's maybe that our show isn't what people think it is. Maybe.
Oh, and you did it.
What was that?
I said, and you did it. Here you are.
Here we are.
Yeah. That conversation. I'm proud of you. I'm very proud of you. No, it's honestly, this has been really fun. And I think that the future of, I think all good podcasts now, because like now that I've done this and I've realized that I have this love of seasonal podcasts, I've really started to feel the stress of the weight of all the other podcasts I like. Like I enjoy Rogan and Mark Maron and Your Mom's House and Two Bears, One Cave. And that alone requires like 12 hours of listening a week, and it's just too much. So give me like 8 episodes and let me get on with my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think just to since I try to give something fun and exclusive in every episode of or podcast interview that I do recently, my thing for you is that I think the next thing that we're going to make when we're not doing High Notes season 2 is that we're going to try to do a podcast limited series that's the story of Victory Records 2000 to 2010.
Wow.
That's an idea we've been kicking around for a long time, and we're going to do it as a book. And then we think that people don't read books, so there's now that Victory's been sold, the catalog is owned by somebody else, and Tony has a new label. I think I can get away with it without him suing me because he has no rights to it, as long as I don't defame him, which I probably will. And I've talked to a lot of people at a lot of record labels that have worked for him, and most of the bands that were on Victory for a long time, and everyone's on board to talk about their experiences. So I think that's the long burner, probably 10 or 12 episode.
It's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
it'll be like a labeled podcast.
I'm exhausted just thinking about it. Yeah.
Right. No, it is. Every time I talk to somebody, I always say that like my currency in the music business, more than money and more than like bylines, like give me your Victory Records story. That's the thing that I collect like Pokemon. I'm like, just tell me a wild story. And I've been in meetings with like EJ that owns Prosthetic Records, or Vince from Metal Blade, or even working at like indie labels where I'll be like, people will sometimes be like, what are you working on? And I'll be like, here's this idea I have. And every time their eyes get really wide and they're like, here's the story. And then here's the next person you need to talk to. And I'm always like, oh yeah, just tell me everything.
Just lay it on me. Yeah.
Yeah. Just lay it out, because it's fascinating. It's, it's the story of a record label that changes everything for alternative music while also destroying countless lives and, screwing people out of money. It's like sex, drugs, and rock and roll turned up to 10.
Right.
And, with a lot of eyeliner. It's like, it's just so good. So that's my exclusive for you, is that's what we're doing hopefully next.
Oh, good luck with that.
Definitely be looking.
Yeah.
Definitely be looking forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're gonna call it when we
Victory.
No, but I think we might call it when Victory ran the streets, because they used to say we run the streets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when Victory ran the streets, something like that. Bulldog ears. Who knows? But that's the next thing after High Notes season 2.
Well,
You heard it here first, folks. Yeah.
Exclusive.
Way more adventurous than I would be to tackle something like that. Like that would be something I actually feel like I'd rather read a book about that than hear a podcast personally. But
Well,
I'm
give you
weird
the
and
transcription.
oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll transcribe it for you.
Well, you just blew my idea out of the water, which was I've been talking to some buddies of mine about just doing deep dives on specific record labels, but not like what you're doing. We're telling the actual story, because really, all I really am is a Pinkin guy. So yeah, me and my buddies were thinking about sitting down and doing like yet another podcast of just like picking a record label like Trustkill or something and going through all of their releases in chronological order. I don't know if that's an episode. I feel like that's like a 5 or 6 records per episode kind of thing, or else we would never get through it. We would get burned out and never want to do it again.
I would absolutely do that podcast for Ferret Records, because I feel like people don't recognize what Ferret did.
Well, I mean, look at what they've turned into with Good Fight, even.
Yeah,
many artists they have under that umbrella.
Yeah. No, those are great. The podcast I'm doing at the end of August, I love their idea. It's every episode the guest has to pitch them a movie, like an original movie idea. And that's
nice.
That's the plot of the show. And I was like, I love that. That's easy.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, where can everyone find the podcast?
Somehow we own High Notes Pod everywhere. So there's a lot of High Notes podcasts on Spotify, but ours is the one that has my name next to it, but it also has a really cool logo made by Nick Farron. Let me just give you the whole spiel. High Notes Podcast. It's available on all major podcasting platforms. You can find the show on Twitter and Instagram by looking up High Notes Pod. There are 8 episodes. They're all out right now. There's also a playlist on YouTube. Season 2 comes in December. I host it. It's presented by Holics.com in partnership with Heart Support and the Global Recovery Initiatives Foundation. The show is edited by Landon DeFever. The theme song is by the band You Mean Everyone We Know, and the artwork comes from the great Nick Farron. And the show doesn't make any money. It's a nonprofit venture where we just want to help people. And if you follow us online soon, you can have a chance to win one of our notebooks because we're just giving them away to people who need a way to journal out their experiences.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking the time out of your night. And I'm sure I'll talk to you probably tomorrow.
Tomorrow? I thought you were going to be like in about 30 seconds.
Maybe. I don't know.
All right. No, that's fine. I have to go take the dog out. So this is perfect timing.
Awesome. Well, enjoy the rest of your night.
Yep. Have a good one.
Take it easy. Yep.
So you want to, I mean, you won't necessarily be able to see this, but I'm going to finally do the giveaway of the 7-inch.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right.
I got a few more minutes.
Yep. It'll take me just a few more minutes. Let me grab the record real quick.
Yep.
Oh, I love having my record player in here so I can just grab shit. All right. Excuse me. All right. All right. So it took a little bit longer than anticipated. We just got done doing our podcast and having James over from High Notes Podcast and Holics. We are giving away my copy of D. Let me go ahead and showcase the variant again for those who maybe haven't seen it. Ooh, very nice.
Beautiful.
Yes. And now you guys can see what I'm seeing. There we are on Facebook and YouTube. And once again, once I figure out which fucking thing I have pulled up, here are all the names. I'm going to pick it. And name. Yeah, whatever. There we go. So basically, I'm going to hit this button. It's going to pick someone random. And then apparently college students can save up to $25 a month if you were on this site and click it up, or battery plus bulbs. I am going to ship this out tomorrow to Tom. Tom will sign it and then send it out to the winner. So without further ado, here we go. And whoever stuck me, I think that's how you say it. And there's the username on the thing. You've won. I will send you a message here shortly. And thanks to everybody who participated. It means a lot. I'm going to try to find some other stuff. Maybe I can hit up On Point Pomade, get some new stuff, maybe give away that. Hit up Bean Bastard, maybe find some other labels or something that want to give us some records maybe to give away. Dan's like, don't do that. Give them to me.
Give them all to me. Every single one of them. Yeah.
But thanks for doing this. It's been a lot of fun the last week, having everybody basically participating. We are a do-it-yourself podcast, and so is Riftfield Land Podcast, Tom's podcast, which he just dropped the episode with Devin, his bandmate in Acacia Strain, talking about the release of Slow Decay. It's out now. Go support them. Pick up the record if you haven't. I actually got my copy of Y and Slow Decay today, and jam it. And thank you again. And we'll be around.
Yeah, we will.
Cool.
Cool.
All right. Well, I guess we're done.
I guess we are. I'll send you this over.
Jeremy Prinz says, look.
What am I looking at?
I don't know. He says, look.
Oh, well. Oh, yeah. Definitely. This is my super congested face. You can actually, if you look close enough, you can actually see where all my sinus pressure is. Just right in here. And today I actually even thought about drilling a hole in my face. Seemed like a really good idea at the time. Just to relieve some of that pressure. But yeah, I'm off to get a COVID test in the morning.
Let me tell you, it feels really great.
Probably don't. I've had one. It's been a second one. So
I've had one.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I'm really not looking forward to like somebody shoving a Q-tip all the way up my nose and it's to scratch my brain with while having sinus congestion. But at the same time, maybe that'll relieve some of the pressure. I don't know. I feel really, really, really bad for whoever's going to do it. So we'll see how that goes. But I am going to bed. So
yep, you enjoy that.
I will.
Well, thanks for watching. We'll post this in a couple of weeks. I know next week's Instagram, Facebook Live thingy is going to be part 2 of Tom Smith. We're joined by Devin of the Acacia Strain. He actually joined us on this thing. Lots of fun stories. And this week's episode that you'll hear on Sunday is going to be Matt McAndrew, vocalist of Slaves. So there are those secrets revealed. And then you obviously heard us do, if you watch the whole thing, you heard us do the Stabbing Westward one, which will be next.
Yep.
And we'll be back next week. And actually, what'll be fun is we have a really great guest in 2 weeks that I'm excited to announce and do all that. Granted, we might talk a lot of sports. It may not be great for Dan, but I'm sure we'll talk about some other bullshit too. It is a person who has no problem chewing the fat. If you've ever heard, I'll give it away. They have a podcast, so at least you know that much.
There you go.
And for the Brutally Speaking podcast, peace out.
Later.
Oop, wrong mouse.